Engines!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there. I want you to be perfect.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him. He talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver. Pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger. No sweater working for the man, alright. Well, I wanna be a firefighter. Cool-headed when the heat is on, yeah. Save my baby from the burning building. Take all the work sprinklers on, alright.
No, he didn't slam you, he didn't bump you, he didn't nudge you. He rubbed you. And rubbing, son, is racing.
Hey, race fans, welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network and welcome to Drafting the Circus. My name is Frank Santorowski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we break down everything racing. Joining me in the studio tonight is Mr. Gray Warren from Richard Childress Racing. I have Richard Uden, the CEO at Eau Rouge Engineering, and Seth Eggert, the NASCAR correspondent at Motorsports Tribune. How is everybody tonight?
Doing good.
Great. Good, thank you.
Man, it's great to talk to you guys, but I'll tell you what, NASCAR put on that race at the Roval. There were, a lot of, folks thinking that it could be a total shit show or it could be something good. But at the end of the day, I'll tell you, I enjoyed it. I thought that they pumped some excitement into that October race that was, lacking attention and lacking attendance for a while. There was enough drama in there to support any sign you want. We had, fuel mileage games. We had worn tires at the end. We had, the guys bouncing back and forth off the chase bubble. At the end of the day, it was Ryan Blaney crossing the checker flag first, right behind, or right in front of Jamie McMurray, and Jimmy Johnson and Martin Truex on the sidelines having wrecked in the last turn of the last lap. And prior restart, we saw Brad Keselowski, who had a great car, take about 8 cars out with him. So, Seth, you were there. You spent your whole weekend at Charlotte. You were at the support races as well as the main event. So let's break down this Roval race, because I'll tell you, I really enjoyed it. How about you?
I enjoyed it too. I would just about everyone I've talked to say it was one of the best races that they've seen in years. Essentially, it was a successful experiment that Marcus Smith and everyone at Speedway Motorsports and NASCAR put together. It is on the schedule again next year. There were some questions about that. That being said, it wasn't the mayhem that the drivers predicted. Granted, in practice, we had a couple of drivers, namely Bubba Wallace and Eric Jones, absolutely destroy their cars on the backstretch chicane, going over the blue curb turtles, as they were nicknamed, into that tire barrier and just demolishing their cars. Otherwise, like you said, with Keselowski's wreck, that was a combination of old tires, faster speeds because they weren't using the front stretch chicane on restarts, and basically overcooking it into turn one. It was a pretty interesting race storyline-wise. Jimmy Johnson essentially eliminated himself when he made a mistake, had too little front brake bias, wheel hopped into Truex going into the final corner on the final lap. He was going in there, he was about 7 points to the good. He lost 6 positions, and then the first driver who was out at the time, Kyle Larson, gained a position when Jeffrey Earnhardt couldn't restart his car after he got spun in the melee. So it was just a perfect storm of events with different storylines, whether it was drivers getting into the playoffs, drivers falling out of the playoffs, the race in general. Bojangles got some extra advertisement thing, courtesy of J.J. Yeley carrying that sign around the track. That was a pretty funny moment. It was a different road course race for NASCAR, and I don't mean just because of location, but the infield, a lot of drivers compared it to a street course. While the oval section, some drivers compared it to the Daytona road course that have competed there, so, like a Jamie McMurray, like a Jimmy Johnson, or even a Kyle Larson. So there was a lot of different things going on for a nice breather, so to speak, for NASCAR.
Yeah, so, I mean, all in all, I mean, I think that it was, like you said, a successful experiment. So, but let's talk really quickly about who we lost out of the chase field. And it was funny because it was hard to keep up with during those last laps because it was bouncing back and forth. I mean, Jimmy Johnson went from almost winning the race to being eliminated from the playoffs. And in the end, he was eliminated from the playoffs.
You got a tiebreaker.
Right, yeah, you got to wonder why he pushed the issue with Truex. If he'd have sat right there in second, he'd have kind of glided on to the next round. But again, the guy is used to winning races. That he's on a 51 race slump. I mean, he's dying for a win. So Jimmy Johnson out of the playoffs, Austin Dillon out of the playoffs, Denny Hamlin out of the playoffs, and the other guy out is Eric Jones. So, we move on from our field of 16 is now a field of 12 going in at Dover. But, but it was really interesting to see. Bowman was in, Bowman was out, Bowman was in, but, Larson was in, Larson was out. It was really a lot of drama there. And it's kind of funny because NASCAR has talked about wanting to kind of eliminate the, air quotes, point racing in the playoffs, but we saw some really interesting things right there. So, Gray, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, it was the whole format, and like Seth alluded to, there's a lot of little storylines that all came to the surface, during and after the race, and this is all brought about by the new chase format that they have, that and the playoff system creates it. Gets into it and creates this drama. You had people moving in and out of the chase on literally on the last lap of the race. So I mean, that really created the buzz that NASCAR wanted. But a lot of positive things came from this Roval. I mean, of course, it was a much anticipated event from the time that it was announced. Some positive, some negative. I think a lot of the negativity was put to bed. I know the drivers weren't real complimentary of the place in the beginning, but I tell you what, it's like this. If you satisfy the fans, it's a win-win for everybody. And I'll have to say the whole weekend at Charlotte was a win-win for NASCAR. The television ratings got a bump. Both Saturday and Sunday's ratings were up. Sure, that was a lot of curiosity, but that's what you want to have in one of these events. And then they said, and Seth can may have heard more on this, but they said it was the strongest ticket sales for this event that Charlotte's Motor Speedway's enjoyed in 10 years.
It was some drivers were talking about it possibly being a sellout. Now, we never actually got official word about it being a sellout, but just walking through the infield, because they had not only the campers in the infield and in the inside of that small section of the Roval, but you had a lot of people who they sold not hot passes, but infield passes that they could come in and walk around, go over the spectator bridge, and watch the race from different vantage points. I went up on the pedestrian bridge at one point to take in the first couple of laps, and it was a very interesting vantage point that I had never really been able to go and see other than maybe 24 Hours of Daytona a few years ago.
One of the things that one of the local TV stations here in the Triad, the High Point, Winston-Salem, Greensboro, they put their videographers at various places throughout the track and really got some unique views from inside the track and outside the track during the course of the race, and it was some really nice video. It was a tough little racetrack, and one of the things that I can tell you from the post-race inspections from the cars at RCR, we saw things fail and break on some of the cars that we haven't seen in some other races when we got. So we encountered some things that we did not know and we weren't anticipating for this race. So it was a learning experience because a little bit different than your normal road course. It was somewhat probably with the type thing, the tightness of it. It was what I would say be like a street course to some degree. And I've also heard, too, that by this going on, this particular race at Charlotte might open the door for some street circuits down the road. Now that remains to be seen. A lot have to be done to run a big, heavy, big stock car on a street course. But they pulled it off at Charlotte, so anything could possibly happen.
And just a quick note on the part failures. Brendan Gaughan, who drove the Xfinity car for RCR to number 3, he post-race said he broke 4 jack bolts on the car, and previously he had only broken 4 throughout his entire career.
Yeah, we had some different components. We saw abnormal wear on and some breakage in some things, and that's part of learning. What it's going to take in preparation for the race in the future. Heretofore, they'd only been going out and running, limited laps and testing and in practice. But, when they ran 109 laps at the place with 40 cars on the racetrack, it was a different animal. But a great weekend all the way around for NASCAR. I mean, a terrific finish. You had one of NASCAR's young guns, very popular win for Ryan Blaney. It was a fresh event and it deserved somewhat of a fresh winner, so to speak. So I think it was great. I mean, tremendous finish. We had a little bit of controversy, so it had all the elements that make a great race all rolled into one.
Yeah, we talk about that maybe doing more of these in the future. Or doing street race. A little early for that talk, but as we talked about last week, the new NASCAR president, he's open to kind of change up the schedule after 2019. So you figure there's a couple of good races that we have now that have those empty road courses. Indianapolis comes to mind for sure.
But one thing you want to guard against, Frank, is and NASCAR has learned this over the years. There's a fine line between bringing something new and oversaturating the situation. I don't think we need to go and they need to put in road, running. I know other tracks do have road races. I mean, Texas has a road course. New Hampshire has a road course. Indianapolis has a road course. I don't think we need to go jump into this with both feet, or we're going to oversaturate what we've gained and end up losing the ground we gained. I think they need to step through this lightly, and build on the success they had this weekend and not overdo it.
And Marcus Smith also said that this would be the only SMI track to do this, that Texas, New Hampshire, they will remain as ovals. Right. He does not want this moving away from Charlotte as far as his tracks are concerned. That still leaves a handful of tracks that do have this capability, like in Indianapolis, a Kansas, or a Pocono.
Yeah, see, for me, the two that come to mind that are Indianapolis and Pocono. Because Indianapolis, number one, because that Brickyard 400, it just doesn't draw the fans like it once did. And Pocono, because they've got two dates so close to one another, you can really change it up. But I have two very different races within the 5 week span that the Pocono races are.
Yeah, Pocono would, and you're looking at, that's a major investment for these tracks too, to upgrade their road race.
Oh, certainly, yeah.
The only places that are ready. I mean, basically, a lot of these road courses that we've got at some of these other tracks are really basically up to lower level amateur racing and karting and whatnot. Daytona is an international circuit. So is Indianapolis. Charlotte put a lot of money into bringing their road course up to standards. So I mean, it would be a big investment for some of these racetracks to do it too. Pocono's road course would have to undergo a lot of work. Basically, right now, all it hosts is some amateur series, weekend series from time to time. So really, you know, like there again, I would be afraid. And here's another thing too, and we're going to get in this as we move forward in the show. The new rules package that NASCAR's announced this week may enhance some of the racing at some of these other tracks to where, you know, well, we don't really need to worry about the Roval in the future. So we'll see how that goes too. And that was a much anticipated announcement, and I think another positive thing that came out of this week for NASCAR.
Oh, absolutely. But before we get on to talking about the new rules package, I do want to save a segment of the show to talk about the new rules. Now, Richard, you watched the Roval race and you saw the little back and forth at the end of the day between Martin and Jimmy, and you've got some thoughts to share on this.
Yeah, I mean, as we all saw at the end of the race there, Jimmy sort of shot himself in the foot a little bit there. He was comfortably in the cut line going through round 2 in the playoffs, and coming into the final chicane complex there, I don't know if he outbraked himself. He actually spanned the car before he got to the apex of the first, that right-hander, and as he was sliding through, collected Martin Truex, which was unlucky. I mean, there was no intention there to take Truex out. There was no malice in it. He just, on old tires, the guy's pushing for a win.
Actually, he got the wheel hopping.
Yeah, I mean, he was pushing. There's no doubt about it. And he was lucky. Wrong place, wrong time for Truex. So after all the dust has settled and Blaney had won the race, as they're all making the way back to pit road, I think it was between turns 1 and 2, Truex just slams into the back of Jimmy Johnson. I mean, it wasn't a little, Bristol love tap. I mean, this, put the, Jimmy Johnson's fuel cell almost into the passenger seat of the car. I mean, it was a big hit. And it blows my mind that a guy, the defending series champion, Martin Truex Jr. here, resorts to that level of petulance and immaturity. It's just ridiculous. I mean, you see that people say these guys are role models, which they are. And there's been a lot of coverage, probably a couple of months ago now, of some independent, some sort of Friday night drivers, Saturday night drivers up at Bowman Gray there. And a police officer had to pull a gun on one of the drivers because he was ramming into another competitor. In the Cup Series, the guys can probably get away with hitting each other with the safety levels that they've got, and they're not going to be too bad. There's never going to be badly injured. But they have to set an example to other people. And it's mind-blowingly ignorant of a guy like Truex with his experience and what he's achieved in the sport to go around and do things like that. I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to suspend him from a race, but if you do that in any other racing series, you are in real trouble. What makes NASCAR and Truex so much better than anybody else? Really disappointed.
And the funny thing is, Truex really didn't lose anything. He was already clinched the spot to the next round, right?
He was
Jimmy did the damage to himself. Jimmy by wheel hopping and taking Martin out, actually, changed his whole complexion of his next several weeks to being out of the playoffs rather than being in the playoffs. So that was penalty enough. I mean, why Martin needed to stick the knife in and then turn it, I don't know. So. But, I was really, that left, to my mind, a really, really sour taste. Better than that. You got to do better than that. Right. Now, Gray, you and I were talking earlier off the air about Truex on the radio and whatnot, and some of us really like Truex, but on the radio, he's He's pretty cutthroat, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, everybody that can draw, he's got his fans. I'm not a particular big Truex fan. I scan him, I listen to him. I get tired of a lot of these drivers, the way they talk on the radio. I'm kind of just a shut up and drive kind of guy, and he can be a little overbearing to me when I listen to him on the scanner. I know these guys are in a high pressure situation, and I can tend to see a little bit of that. But I mean, it's part of the sport, And I think I look at someone like Jimmy Johnson, and I listen to him and his cool demeanor on the radio and how he handles situations and stuff, and I see how he's ascended to the top of the sport and has 80-some victories in the sport. And part of that is, his ability to let things go and rise above and not get caught up in these little things. A lot of guys get on the racetrack and let little things get under their skin, and I think it affects their overall performance as the race goes on. The guys who can just stay focused and not let these things, they know during the course of the race, 500 miles, and you're in that car for 3.5 hours, the whole race in its totality, some things are going to go your way, some things aren't. And the way you overcome them and the way you approach them, in large part, has a big bearing on how you're gonna finish that race. So I tend to listen to a lot of guys on the racetrack, and I tend to listen to their attitudes and how they respond in different situations. And Truex is a guy that he wears his emotions on his sleeve a lot, when he's in that car.
Absolutely, yeah. So very well put, Grace. So before we move on to talking about the new rules package and previewing Dover, Seth, we had an Xfinity race there at the Roval as well that you were in attendance at. So let's run through the Xfinity, because those guys are in their playoff season too.
Yes, and it seemed Austin Cindric was going to be the favorite for at least the very early part of the race. He got the pole. He dominated the first 13 laps until he overcooked his rear tires and just looped it in the infield section of the Roval. From that point on, it was pretty much game on for just about everybody. Chase Briscoe ended up dominating the race, leading 33 of the 55 laps, and it was his first career victory. He's running part-time for both Roush Fenway Racing and number 98, which is a combination effort between Biaggi then Best and Stuart Haas Racing. And it was nice to see another first-time winner, as well as somebody who essentially lost their ride last year because of lack of sponsorship when Brad Keselowski Racing shut down. Justin Marks, who ran both races this past weekend, this was his last NASCAR weekend. He's stepping away from NASCAR. He finished runner-up in the Xfinity race. Cindric was the best finishing driver of the playoff drivers. Justin Allgaier looked like he was going to be the favorite for the championship. He was involved in yet another accident 2 weeks in a row now, and he's dropped to just about 12 points above the cutoff now. Cindric, who, like I said, who dominated a very early portion of this race, is still 9 points out heading into the elimination race this weekend at Dover. And Ross Chastain right now holds that cutoff. He's right now the last person in. And somebody else I also want to just highlight real quick for the Xfinity Series, Alex Labbe. On the first lap, he lost the axle cap, and the axle slid out of the rear of the car. He lost power, went 2 laps down, was able to get back on the way back through the field, and finished 13th. And he had qualified a career best 5th, and it looked like he was going to have a career day. I would say he still had pretty much a very good day, despite not getting into the top 10.
All right, well, absolutely, yeah. So, but now, Seth, you've talked about some more parts failures, and Gray, we were talking about parts failure before. So you figure with 1 year behind us, of data on this track. Do you think coming back, next October, that these guys in the shop will kind of figure out the fixes to some of these interesting failures that we haven't seen before?
Well, obviously it's a learning experience for everybody. We're gonna, everybody will go back and look at their cars and look at their pieces, and they'll study and do some failure analysis on things, and they'll improve. They'll know what to look for. And obviously, we learned a lot going there for the first time. Everybody was on equal footing when we went there. It was new to everybody. Nobody had an advantage. Everybody had an opportunity to go test there and run the same amount of tests and the practice and everything. So basically, it was a clean sheet of paper when we arrived at the Roval. So, next year it'll be a different story. Everybody have at least a notebook from a previous trip to start on. So, and we'll look at everything, and we'll carry a better car back. So will everybody else than we took this year. We should see a better. We will probably see a better. I mean, I don't know how we could see a better race, but I think it's a competitive track. And we'll see the same amount of competition there. The drivers will get better when they go back. The cars will be better. So, it gives Goodyear another year to look at tires and different things, in which I thought the tires were great there. I never heard anybody complain about tires. It's like anything else. You had tire degradation there, and that's a good thing when you go to a circuit. As far as the racing goes. So yeah, we'll look forward to going back next year. And I think also the race being in the chase, adds an extra element to it.
Oh, for sure, yeah. So speaking of next year, great. NASCAR announced the specs for 2019, and we're looking at bigger spoilers, bigger splitters, less horsepower, something very similar to what we saw at the All-Star race. So, would you be so kind as to kind of break down the rule changes for next year and give your thoughts on them?
Well, one of the big things, and they're going to institute a package similar to what they ran at the All-Star races, and it's been dubbed the All-Star package. Obviously, that's the moniker that people are using with the aero enhancements in the car. They're gonna use that package at I forget how many races they're gonna use it at. Seth can probably
18.
18 races next year, and they're gonna give them a little bit more of where they have a little more throttle response, which is something they didn't have at the All-Star race. It'll give them a little bit more throttle response where they can complete a pass. Things like that. So we'll see how that goes. A little bit of a tweak to what we saw in the thing, and I think they're going to do that with tapered spacers in the throttle body. Mm-hmm. Another big change that was announced: the 2019 Daytona 500 will be the last race that NASCAR employs stricter plate at. The other plate races, as we've known to call them, won't be able to call them plate races anymore in the future. They're going to institute tapered spacers in the throttle body or beneath the throttle body at the second Daytona races and both Talladega races next year. So that will change. There's an overall little bit of reduction in horsepower that we'll see across the board next year. I think that's right.
It'll go down to 550, where the All-Star race earlier this year was 400.
400. What?
So
That's on the. Yeah, that's on the 18 races that they're going to use the All-Star package. And what that does, it gives the drivers a little bit more throttle response when they run, and they can help them complete a pass, in other words. So that'll help some too. Everybody be on equal footing. I like that thing. That's one of the things that I saw. I thought they could improve upon with the All-Star package. And then, of course, obviously, we've got the new package coming up from Daytona. So all these are positive changes, I think, that will enhance the racing at a lot of these tracks. So the 18 tracks I think you were talking about is mostly the mile and a half. I don't think – go ahead, Seth.
It is mostly the mile and a half, and it's also Michigan, Fontana, some of the bigger tracks as well. One other note I do want to make is they're also going to have aero ducts at all of these tracks that they're using the All-Star package at, except for Atlanta, Darlington, both Pocono races, and Indianapolis because of the heavy braking that occurs at those tracks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Atlanta will not have the aero ducts.
They will have brake ducts instead.
Okay, so they're gonna modify it a little bit and probably make a bigger brake duct or something. And it'll still probably disturb the air. It'll just be a little bit different way. So they'll duct the air probably out through the wheels. So we'll see how that goes. Yep. Well, and I'm sure that's still is open to some work on them too. So yeah, but I'm excited about it. I think it's something to look forward to next year.
So let me ask you guys this: so with the death knell on restrictor plate racing after Daytona,
well, it's not. They're just doing away with the plate itself. It's still
right. Yeah,
restricted race. Yeah.
So what type race do you think we'll see at Talladega or the second Daytona? I mean, is this going to take away the huge pack?
No.
It'll be similar but different.
Similar but different. Okay, Seth.
Well, the reason why I'm saying it that way, it's going to be similar that it's going to be in a pack. But because the drivers are going to have more throttle response, they'll have an easier ability to make a pass.
Right.
And therefore, they're not going to be stuck double file or triple file or whatever you want to call it for laps on end like how they are right now.
You won't see one line stall out like you have. My understanding, you won't. You know how you've seen at Daytona where the high line or the low line, whatever way, one of the line kind of stalls out. That they get to a certain point, they side draft, and they just don't have it the extra. You're still going to see pack racing, and that's a byproduct of the draft. The draft is the great equalizer. This will give them a little bit more throttle response to allow them to complete passes and things like you'll see some of the old slingshot come back that we saw, in a bygone era, things like that. So yeah, and I'm sure that again that's going to be something they'll have to kind of tweak on a little bit too, and it may be a test or two that we'll encounter along the way prior to going back, but. We'll see how that goes, but still, it's somewhat exciting. Again, the changes are, and I think it's all positive. I think these are steps to create better racing for the fans.
Oh, no doubt. Now, Richard, you've been a little quiet here for a bit, so I mean, you have worked on these cars for some time. So, well, what are your thoughts on these new rules for 19?
I think they're positive, they're encouraging. They've actually turned around and listened to what the fans have had to say, and you reacted in a positive way. At the end of the day, it's an entertainment industry, and the job is there to get backsides on seats, isn't it? And get people in the crowds and getting people watching it on TV, and that's waned a little bit in the last few years. So I think it can only be considered to be a positive move by NASCAR in general for them to be looking to implement this.
All right, so it sounds like we're thumbs up all around for the new rule changes, and it's going to be really exciting to see them on the track next year. So before we move on to talking about Formula One, I want to first talk about some driver movement. And Gray, the team you work for, you've got a new driver to announce.
Yeah, we of course it was made news during Las Vegas weekend that Ryan Newman was going to depart RCR, and it subsequently came out that he's going to take the 6th ride from Roush. So it was announced this weekend at Charlotte that Daniel Hemrick will go into the 31. He'll be promoted from the RCR Xfinity ride. So they'll take over the 31 and join Austin Dillon as his teammate for next year.
That's fantastic. I really have a lot of respect for Daniel Hemrick as a driver. I think the guy's a real hot shoe, and I think he'll do well in the car. Now, Seth, you followed Daniel through most of his career. So, what are your thoughts?
I think it's a well-deserved and well-timed move up the ladder. I mean, I remember when he won the Legends Million, which was a legend car race at Charlotte Motor Speedway about 7 or 8 years ago. And that is what really launched his career. That actually gave him the money to be able to move up from late models into the truck series. And he's been able to parlay that ever since with rides from Brad Keselowski, Richard Childress Racing, and now the Cup Series. They still don't know what number it's going to be. They're bouncing around between the number 8 and the number 31. But it's a well-deserved move up the ladder, in my opinion.
Now, Gray, are there any words on primary sponsor? Are they going to have Caterpillar still on board, or is that going with Ryan?
No. I think Caterpillar is an RCR sponsor. It was there prior to Ryan coming over because Jeff Burton drove the Caterpillar Chevrolet before Ryan came on board. It's my understanding Caterpillar is still with. I don't know the terms of the contract, but it's my understanding that Caterpillar is going to be with RCR again next year.
Fantastic news. So, and Seth, there's a couple of other driver movement going on there.
Yeah, JTG Doherty Racing, the number 47. It will no longer be AJ Allmendinger. It was announced prior to the race weekend that he was not going to be returning, and at the track on Saturday or Friday, I should say, Brian Priest was announced that he will take over the number 47 Kroger Clicklist Chevrolet Camaro next year for JTG Doherty. Priest took a chance on himself last year running just what was originally going to be 2 races for Gibbs, finished runner-up in his first race, and won the second one. Since then, that turned into a total of 7 races last year, 12 this year, and he won at Bristol earlier this year in a Dash for Cash race, which he joked that the money he won from that race, he was finally able to go and pay off the loans that he took out in order to run for Gibbs in the first place.
Everything comes full circle. Fantastic. So before we move on and talk about Formula One, we're at Dover next week. So let's go around the table and make some picks for Dover. And this is the first race of round 2. What do they call the Challenger round?
It's just the round of 12 now.
Oh, the round. Well, they used to call it, the Champion round, Challenger round?
Yeah, they got rid of those about 2 years ago.
That was a sprint thing, wasn't it?
Yes.
All right, so anyway, so we're racing at Dover. So whoever wins the Dover race is going to get the cool trophy with the rock monster. So Richard, who do you like for Dover?
Good question. Let's go with it. Kind of, it's a boring pick, isn't it? But
he has a solid track record at Dover, so that's a good pick. Gray, who do you like?
Oh Lord, let's see. I'm gonna say, Jimmy Johnson is still in the midst of a 50-some race winless streak. He had a shot this weekend, probably one of his best runs of the year. I think he kind of rebounds from the disappointment of not making the playoffs this year, and he gets a win at Dover this weekend.
You kind of stole my picks. I was thinking that same thing. So, Seth, who do you like?
Well, I was also thinking Hendrick Motorsports driver, but not Jimmy Johnson. I actually wrote a piece on him earlier this week. I think it's going to be Chase Elliott. In 5 starts there, he has 4 top 10 finishes. That one start that wasn't in the top 10, a 12th place earlier this year, and he was runner-up there last year in this race.
All right, I'm going to go with Kyle Busch just because, how could you go wrong with Kyle Busch? Because the guy wins a lot of races. So, but anyway, so, tune in to NBC next week to watch the race in Dover. Now, Richard, we had a Formula One race out there in Russia. Mm-hmm. We saw Lewis Hamilton take his 8th win of the year, but it looked for a while like his teammate, Valtteri Bottas, was going to win until team orders kind of rear their ugly head. And whether or not team orders are ugly head or not is up for debate. So, before we start discussing team orders, just run us through the race right quick.
Well, it all sort of led back to Saturday, really. In qualifying, Hamilton made a mistake, and which led to Bottas taking the pole position there, which he deserved. And then off the start, Bottas made a great start to pull away. Hamilton actually got a relatively poor start, and then actually got a sort of a slipstream coming back from Bottas to help pull him away from Vettel, and they pretty much sat there for the majority of the race with Bottas ahead and Hamilton second, and Vettel sort of clinging on for dear life in third there. And it was a relatively processional race. You had Max Verstappen, who qualified at the back of the grid due to engine penalties, stormed through and have a not a shot at winning, but certainly put the make the guys at the front think twice about the strategy calls for that one. And then you saw the big talking point of the weekend with the Mercedes team making the call that Bottas has to let Hamilton through, sort of 2/3 of the way through the race there, because Hamilton was suffering from tyre wear, and they didn't want Vettel to be able to attack Hamilton. So Bottas, playing the good team role, let him through there, and protected Hamilton from Vettel. And it was a bit of a sort of, you're thinking, well, are they going to suddenly let Bottas back and give him the win at the end of the race, which he undoubtedly deserved? And the answer was no. It was all very disappointing that they let it sort of get to that level of, discussion, really. And it was all very, very unavoidable, really. I think Hamilton had enough there to hold off Vettel by himself. I don't think he needed any help, but that was Mercedes just being ultra conservative with it. And he was very, very, very disappointing, really. But
most of the fan base really kind of, were like left with a sour taste in their mouths after watching this race.
It's very,
right?
very, very unnecessary.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like Hamilton's got a pretty good lead, right? But by letting him, by Bottas letting him through, this gives him a full 2-race lead, right? He's got a 50-point lead, 25 points for a win. Hamilton can DNF the next 2 races and still be tied for the lead. It's decently good business, I guess, but it's for the fans that paid 150 rubles to come in. It's it's a little meh, but team orders have been in Formula One as long as I can remember, and certainly as long as you can remember. And some of the best stories are the guys that defy the team orders,
Yep.
So when you talk about at this stage in the season where Lewis has a pretty good lead and we want to go ahead and protect that lead and ensure the championship, I really don't have a problem with that. Back in the past, you've got times like 81, Brazil. Second race of the season, Carlos Reutemann is leading his teammate Alan Jones at Williams, and they throw out the sign P1 Jones, and Carlos is supposed to, let Jones go on by. It's second race of the season, Reutemann defies the team orders, wins the race, which sets up an uneasy situation for the rest of the season that culminates in Reutemann is leading the championship, and Jones and Reutemann actually collide with one another in Canada late in the season, literally destroying Carlos's shot at the championship. 1 year later, we have the Ferrari cars comfortably leading at Imola, and they put out a sign, hold your pace, hold position. Didier Pironi chops across the front of Gilles Villeneuve and wins the race. Villeneuve is incensed, and in fact, there are some folks that will tell you that the lap that he lost his life on at the next Grand Prix, he was just trying to beat his teammate because he was so pissed with the defiance of the team orders the week before. So, do you think team orders are good for the sport, bad for the sport? Because you've seen guys like Schumacher who have a contract that says my teammate's not allowed to beat me, right? And Rubens Barrichello was happy to play that. Eddie Irvine did for a while. Ricardo Patrese was happy to play second fiddle when he was Mansell's teammate at Williams and say, okay, yeah, fine, win all you want, and just let me win one at the end of the season when you have the championship, in the bag. Yep. So, but Richard, just throw me your thoughts on team orders. Team orders for Formula One.
No matter what you can do. I mean, there was a while there where the FIA tried to restrict them and tried to sort of ban them, but I mean, you're never gonna get away from it. It does leave a little bit of a sour taste in the mouth, especially when it happens early in the season, because it's just totally unnecessary. And, they had the whole thing with Ferrari in the early 2000s when they had Barrichello let Schumacher through in Austria when he was 4 or 5 race wins ahead of everybody else at that point. So it was all a little bit silly and a little bit unnecessary. And I think it doesn't help the sport. Formula One, unlike a lot of the other racing series, is a team sport, and the teams work together. And your first person you've got to beat is your teammate. So there's a reluctance for some people to back down to their teammate. But at the end of the day, the guy with the name over his door is the guy that pays your wages, and you've got to do what they say. I mean, one of my favourite examples of team orders goes back to, it was either 88 or 89. I think it was 89 at Imola, when Prost and Senna were first and second in McLaren in qualifying, and they had a gentleman's agreement that whoever got off the line first, and was leading going into the hairpin at the end of the long sort of semi-straight at San Marino, would lead coming out of that corner. They weren't allowed to sort of try and pass each other because, there's a lot of accidents there, and, they didn't want to take each other out. So they come off the line, and I think Senna was leading, and Prost had a good chance to pass him, but backed off. And then Gerhard Berger had a very serious accident at the Tamburello corner, and was very lucky to walk away, but they stopped the race. So that then led to a restart. And on the restart, Prost got ahead and was leading into the first corner. And Senna just dives down the inside and pushes Prost off the side of the track and out of the way and goes on to win the race. And Prost is furious with Senna and screaming at him in the, post-race. And Senna's so matter of fact just turns around and says, well, our agreement was for the start of the race. This was the restart. The agreement did not count. And it's just brilliant how, the sort of arrogance in the way of Senna, but also the very matter of fact and being right, showed how team orders count for so little when drivers' egos are in play. I don't think you're ever going to get rid of team orders, and I think it's something that you're just going to have to deal with, as wrong as it is in many ways, I think. But certainly at this stage of the season that we saw with I mean, from a Mercedes point of view, I guess I can see a little bit of where they're coming from. This now puts, Hamilton 50 points clear of Vettel, which is 2 race wins. Whereas if he'd finished second, he would have been 43 points ahead. And, that could have been 2 DNFs and 2 wins with Vettel. It would have put Vettel back in the lead. So I can understand it a little bit, just covering themselves. It's a shame.
Yeah, well, so coming up, we've got, how many races are left? This was the 16th round, so...
5 or 6.
So 5 or 6. So, do you think Ferrari's chances are just dead in the water at this point?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
If Mercedes owns, there are talk of some pretty bad weather over in Japan this weekend for the Japanese race. So unless something crazy happens out there. So, you need Vettel to win one of the next two races and Hamilton not finish for it to really go, ooh, hello. But, outside of that, pretty, another championship number 5 or whatever it's going to be now.
Has Hamilton had any DNFs this year?
Yes, Austria.
Okay.
I think that's the only one. I can't think of any others.
Yeah,
There's both Bottas and Hamilton had DNFs in Austria. I think it was hydraulic issues. But outside of that, I don't think so.
As much as we like to crack on Hamilton, and Richard, I know that because you're the president of the Lewis Hamilton fan club, the guy is just racking up wins left and right, and he's poised to win another world championship. And this guy's place in the record books is secure for years and years.
Oh yeah, I mean, hey, look, the guy's good. I think in years to come, when his career's finished with, we'll look back on that qualifying lap from Singapore as that was a real statement. There's undoubtedly he's had the best car, the majority of his career when he's won the World Championships. But that was something special. They didn't have the fastest car there that weekend. And for him to pull that out, credit where credit's due. That was something special.
Absolutely. And there's only a small handful of guys who have won the championship that didn't have the fastest car. You know what I mean? You can
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, and that's a symptom of sport. So, but Hamilton is really kind of, as much as you don't want to admit it, he's getting right. Yeah, he's good. He's getting right up there. He's like, he's when you talk about the giants of the sport, he's going to be in the top 5 names you ever mentioned. So
at some point, without any hesitation, and
yep. So
you have to look at, and you can always talk this, can't you? The era of the sport and when you viewed it, but does this put him in the same? Say he wins this year and he gets another. Say he matches Schumacher's 7 championships. Is he in the same league as Schumacher? I don't think so. I think he's.
Gray was coming in this.
Well, yeah, Richard. It's that way in every form of motorsports. You look at the all-time greats, and Richard Petty told me a long time ago. He said, "Look," he said, "people are great in their time." He said it's virtually impossible to stack up. I mean, you can look at the stats and you can have the most wins of anybody in this, but I mean, to say that so and so was the best all time, I think is nearly impossible. You can be the best of your time, the best of your generation, or whatever, but I think it's virtually impossible to say. And we hear that every day, all the comparisons in NASCAR between Richard Petty and Dale Earnhardt and Bobby Allison, Cale Yarborough, Richard Petty, David Pearson. The list goes on, and that's something for the fans to debate, I guess.
Oh, for sure, yeah. So, but again, you've got guys that had relatively short careers, like Jim Clark, Jochen Rindt, guys like that who were just amazing at what they did, and with the equipment that they were given. And so, how do you compare them to Lewis Hamilton? You can't, because you can't compare that era to this era. So. But,
like Jimmy Clark's era, and
even you talked about him earlier, Gilles Villeneuve. I mean, what would he have achieved if he hadn't had that accident? I mean,
the guy has a total of 6 Grand Prix wins, but man, he was fantastic to watch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so and Hamilton's got how many wins now? He's
50
got
almost.
He has. I want to say it's 50 poles, right?
Yeah, he's not. I don't think he's going to catch Schumacher's win record of 92, isn't it?
He might. If anybody can, he can. But,
I think he's going to. I think at some point he's going to. I think in 2 or 3 years, I think he's going to turn around and be like, I'm going to go off and be a movie star with Nicki Minaj or something. I don't know. I think he's going. I don't think he's going to keep going like Schumacher did. And in all fairness, if Schumacher hadn't quit in 2006 and he'd carried on, which I think during his comeback showed he certainly had the pace at times, he would have won well in excess of 100. It was just the political timing of his retirement for Ferrari that probably limited his number of victories.
Yeah, and too, you look at each driver, especially in the modern era of Formula One. It's got a lot to do with the equipment they're in, and obviously, he's got those wins with Mercedes that he's just racked up over the last 5 or 6 years, and they've been the class of the field, and no doubt about it. And Schumacher was in a similar situation. His equipment was the class of the field, so obviously that helps, and they're up to. Their standards are up to par to be able to sit in that equipment, no doubt. But there's a lot has to do with the particular modern era of the sport.
I'm just trying to think, outside of Hamilton's first championship when he was with McLaren, has it ever gone down to the last race of the season and him win a championship? I can't think off the top of my head. I know he went down to the last race of the season with Rosberg and he lost that one. But, of course, the year before his rookie season, he probably should have won, but then had that brain fade in China and crashed coming into the pit lane.
Yeah, and that's probably, what's the old adage? You gotta lose one before you can win one kind of thing that they always throw out. To a greater
extent, yeah.
Yeah, something like that too. But yeah, I mean, no doubt, he's a very talented guy. But like any other sport, when you dominate a sport, you leave yourself open for criticism, and obviously, there's and just to throw the football thing out there, a lot of people don't like Tom Brady because he wins all the time, things like that. It's the same kind of thing. But yeah, you have to respect him and you have to respect what he's achieved.
Oh yeah,
absolutely, yeah, for sure, yeah. So, but guys, we've got about 4 minutes left or less. So I just want to just briefly touch on a couple of IndyCar news stories. Felix Rosenqvist is confirmed as Scott Dixon's teammate at Ganassi. Santino Ferrucci, our young American friend from Connecticut, who has been in the Haas F1 development program, looks to be like he's going to be doing a full season of IndyCar with Dale Coyne Racing. And speaking of Scott Dixon, his movie, Born Racer, dropped the other day on DVD and digital, and the reviews are in, and the movie is fantastic. If you want to watch a really good racing documentary, Born Racer is all about Scott Dixon. You can find it on Amazon, FYE. You can find it on Best Buy, Barnes & Noble. You can either download it or you can buy the DVD. But take a few minutes and watch this. Scott Dixon is one of the behemoths of the sport of IndyCar, and they've made this film, and it's absolutely fantastic. So take a look at it. But we are just about out of time. I have enough time to go around the table for a final thought from everybody. Now, Richard, are we Formula One next week? Suzuka
this coming weekend, yep. So that's going to be, maybe even a Saturday night.
All right, so you need to give me a pick.
Around about midnight race start.
All right, who do you like?
Suzuka. Oh, Raikkonen.
Seth, who you like for Suzuka?
Bottas.
And Gray?
Vettel. He's got to make hay.
He's got to make hay, yeah. So, and Gray, one final thought for the night before we run out of time.
Well, we're going into the next round of the playoffs. We got Dover coming up. It's going to be a big weekend there, and then look forward to seeing how this first race of the second round goes.
All right, Seth, final thought for the night.
In the NASCAR Canyon Pro West race this past weekend, Hailie Deegan became the first female to win in that series and the first female to win since Shauna Robinson in the 1980s.
That was huge, yeah. And our friend Louise was there at that race, so that's cool. Richard, one final thought for the night?
It enraged me so much I've got to go back to it. Truex, ban him for a race, park him, do something, make an example of him. It's not good enough.
All right, so I'll get a hold of NASCAR, tell them to ban Truex. But until then, we're out of time, guys. I want to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network. I want to thank iHeartRadio. I want to thank you, Gray, Richard Uden. And I want to thank all those folks that listen to us every week. And we'll talk to you in a week. Have a good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com.
Enter website.